Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started as people continue joining us. If you're just joining us, just a couple housekeeping reminders. If you would like, please just update your Zoom name with your preferred pronouns. And if you are here from the press, please just include the media outlet that you're with so that at the end, when we have Q&A, we know who to call on for questions. And so with that, we are going to get started this morning. Thank you to our allies from across New York State for joining us here today. My name is Lauren Tropinato. I will be your host this morning. I am a New York State Democratic Committee member from the 76th Assembly District. And along with Erica Vladimir and Corey Otegra, my co-collaborators, I represent a coalition of over 265 New York State candidates, party leaders, political clubs, advocacy groups, and community organizers who are calling on Governor Cuomo, our elected and party officials, to protect the health and safety of all New Yorkers by waiving the 2021 designating petition signature requirements due to the dangers posed by COVID-19. Along with Erica, I am one of the co-authors of the letter onto which many of you signed, voicing your support for our leaders to cancel petitioning. And truthfully, I wrote that letter from a place of sadness and anger. Like many of us at this point, I've had many friends and family who have been sick with COVID. I have friends in the healthcare industry who for the past year have been working 7 days a week to keep us safe. I'm worried more of my loved ones will fall sick. I'm worried I will fall sick going out and petitioning and campaigning. I am sad that every single day more of our friends and family are getting sick and dying. I wrote that letter only 6 days ago, and in less than a week, 904 New Yorkers throughout the state have died because of COVID. And that is ultimately why I'm frustrated and angry. The elected leaders that I voted for have not shown accountability and responsibility to keep us safe during a global public health crisis. Petitioning is sort of the bookend of this pandemic. You know, it started while we were in the middle of petitioning season last year. And after nearly a year of this, nothing's under control. We've had time to figure out and implement ways to safely petition and campaign, and we've not. Other states like New Jersey, who was one of our allies early on in keeping, with the lockdown and all of the regulations, they've already implemented online petitioning. They understand that this is a risk. You know, under normal circumstances, this is not something we'd advocate for. This is part of our democracy, a part of our process, and we understand and respect that. But nothing about what's happening right now is normal. You know, one thing I want to point out is that everyone pays attention to the big ticket races like mayor and city council, and that's undoubtedly very important. But what people don't realize, and what I speak for as a representative of my party here in New York, is that many of the people who have to collect signatures don't even end up on the ballot. I'm talking about unpaid volunteer party positions like county committee, judicial delegates, district leaders, state committee, throughout the entire state. In New York City alone, the city that was once the epicenter of this crisis, we have thousands of people running for those seats, largely uncontested. That means they won't even be on the ballot, but they have to be out there getting signatures, putting their health and safety at risk. These are volunteers. These are people who are just committed members of their community who are out there with the other candidates. Collecting signatures right now creates an unacceptable risk to the exposure of COVID. I cannot put my neighbors, candidates, volunteers, their staff, Board of Election workers at risk for what would be essentially mandated non-socially distanced interactions for the sake of a bureaucratic process. Given the dire circumstances of where we are with the pandemic, canceling petitioning is the only option right now. As a representative of my community, I can't ask the people that I love to put themselves at risk like that. We have the power to prevent this from becoming a super spreader event. We might not have been able to stop people from going on vacation or traveling for the holidays. We have the power to do this. That's why we're here today. That's what we're going to talk about. The question now is, will our leaders answer our call and take action? Thank you so much for joining us, for being a part of this movement. I'm truly overwhelmed with the statewide support. My friends from the state committee, upstate, downstate, fellow district leaders, state committee members. I'm honored to have you here with us today. We're going to hear from some other amazing community leaders. And with that, I would like to pass it over to my colleague and co-collaborator who will be speaking with us today, the Honorable Cory Ortegra, New York City Council candidate for District 7 and Democratic leader for the 70th Assembly District.
All right, bear with me for a moment because all three of us are doing some back end work. All right, at the spotlight, boom. Okay. And as I'm getting myself ready, just FYI, I'm also gonna play semi-sergeant of arms when it comes to the time allotted for the speakers. You have 2 to 3 minutes. I'm going to kindly insert a nice mellow tone voice, say 2 minutes, or excuse me, 1 minute left. Just be mindful of that. And because we have a lot of people and we're trying to get this done with enough time so we can also take questions from the press. Can everyone hear me? I'm good? Lauren, Erica? Okay. So my name is Cory Ortegra. I'm a Democratic district leader in West Harlem in the 70th Assembly District Part D. I'm also a city council candidate for District 7, covering Manhattan Valley, Morningside Heights, Manhattanville, Hamilton Heights, and portions of Washington Heights. And, you know, same as Lauren, I come from a position of experience, lived experience. I actually contracted COVID last year in March, petitioning, right? And the governor had just signed the executive order. Oh, gotta put the timer on. The governor had just signed the executive order saying, okay, this is the last day, great. We wrapped up. At that time, we didn't have all this information about masks and what to wear. We wore gloves. We tried our best. And I come home and I'm like happy, oh, I get to work from home with my wife. And I start coughing and jokingly to my wife, I'm like, oh my God, I hope I didn't give you COVID. And that's exactly what I did. I gave my wife COVID and we were both, we went through the worst of the experiences. And on top of that, I'm a person of color with diabetes type 2. So I honestly thought I wasn't gonna make it. And I had just gotten married about a few months ago. And to the point where I lost appetite, embarrassing enough, diarrhea, loss of smell, taste, and to the point where I couldn't breathe. I couldn't walk 6 feet without being winded, to the point where I had to go to the emergency room. At that time, I didn't know that, well, two things, that people of color were more susceptible to the virus and eventually dying. And second, that the ventilator was actually a bad thing, that if you got on the ventilator, chances are you were not coming off of it. And I was pleading the doctor, I can't breathe. Please put me on this ventilator. For the love of God, like, Cory, it's bad. Let me give you an asthma pump. Let me give you some antibiotics. And by the grace of God, that saved my life. So that's where I come from, my personal experience. But my personal experience is not unique, but it's unique in the district I represent, where it's 70% communities of color. And in my District 7, communities of color, especially in NYCHA, were hit the hardest, in Grant and Manhattanville public housing. So I can't ask my community to choose between protecting their health and exercising their right to democratic representation, because that's wrong. And I get it. I'm competitive. We have a lot of people here from upstate and downstate that want to win. I have 13 candidates in my race, but as competitive as I could be, I do not seek harm on my opponents, on their family members, their volunteers, their supporters. The same goes for me, for my family, my wife, the volunteers that I have, the core team. I can't risk that. So that's why I'm asking the state legislature and Governor Cuomo, with the authorities that he has under this emergency, this pandemic, to do the right thing and provide alternatives that support both our health and our right to a democratic representation. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming. And thank you for the city council candidates that signed on board with this and the municipal candidates as well. Back to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Corey, for sharing your story with everyone today. Is our next speaker here? Next up, we are going to be hearing from the Honorable Jumaane Williams, candidate for New York City Public Advocate. Is Mr. Williams here?
Lauren, I don't see him.
Okay. I think he's running a couple minutes late. Next up, we'll come back to Mr. Williams. Do we have Councilmember Van Bramer?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So next up, we will be hearing from the Honorable Jimmy Van Bramer, candidate for Queens Borough President and City Council Member for District 26.
Thank you. First of all, let me say thank you to you, Lauren, Corey, and Erica for bringing us all together and organizing this amazing list of organizers, activists, elected officials, candidates. I am proud to sign on to this effort because in a matter of weeks, hundreds of candidates with literally thousands of volunteers and staff will be forced into hundreds of thousands of close contacts, if not millions of close contacts, as we all rush to try to meet these petition signature numbers. This is without question a super spreader event in the making, and it does not have to be this way. I know that everyone here knows that there are now 4 new coronavirus variants that are believed to be even more infectious than the original strain and potentially even more deadly. It is absolutely a public health disaster in the making to send tens of thousands of people out to have what needs to be, by very definition, a close personal contact, the act of asking another person to come close to you, to be able to ask them to sign a piece of paper, to give them a pen, to have them sign, to make sure that information is correct. And I will say this, the numbers that are being proposed in terms of a reduction do little to mitigate the potential disaster here, particularly if you're running as an insurgent, because we all know that county machines will go through the petitions. So if the number is 1,000 or 1,200, you really need to get 3 or 4 times that amount, or else you risk being thrown off the ballot, having risked your life and the lives of your volunteers and staff, only to have someone rifle through your petition signatures and potentially throw you off the ballot.
1 minute
This
left.
doesn't need to happen this way. We know how to do this. It can be done online. The in-person petitioning absolutely must be suspended statewide. And I join everyone here on this call in knowing that we are ready, willing, and able to engage in democracy in every way possible in order to make our cases and share our values and our issues, but no one wants to put anyone's life in jeopardy. I'll just close by saying my family too, in just the last month to 6 weeks, had 2 close immediate family members test positive. And it was the scariest moment of my life. And I do not want to ask friends, volunteers, staff to go out and petition in early March, only to have someone report to me a few days later that they have a cough or they've developed a fever. And I cannot imagine that anyone on this call wants to hear that and know that they might have placed someone in harm's way. We cannot do it. We should not do it. The governor should suspend. Our leaders in the state legislature should suspend this altogether. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member. We are very grateful to have you as a supporter and ally in these efforts. It really means a lot to us. I just want to take a minute for people who are joining. If you would like, please update your pronouns in your Zoom name to your preferred pronouns. And if you're with the press, please just include your media outlet. With that, I would like to present our next speaker. We are joined this morning by the Honorable Jumaane Williams, candidate for New York City Public Advocate. Mr. Williams, I will pass it over to you, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Peace and blessings to everyone. Can you hear me? Awesome. Thank you very much for those who have had the courage to bring this forward and all the candidates who have signed on. I too believe that we have to suspend the in-person petitioning process. It's amazing. I think it's morally irresponsible. We have a moral mandate to do what we can to minimize people from being in person with anything. We've spent time trying to figure out closing schools, closing businesses. To then say that we have to have in-person petitioning is a bit hypocritical, and it's quite irresponsible. I just have to say that, and it doesn't make any sense. It's not something that it is a cost. Like closing businesses actually costs us something. Closing schools, there's a cost to it that you have to balance. This is simply about whether or not we want more people on a ballot. That doesn't make any sense to risk all of these lives. The bill that came through the state, I think actually makes things worse. They've lessened the time which people can get these petitions, which means it's an even more condensed time period. We have basically created and are pushing forward a super spreader event, and it actually makes no sense. There's no amount of in-person petitioning that can make sense just because of the sheer number of candidates who will then need to get 3 or 4 times those numbers, not to mention the volunteers that will have to do it. And so that literally means thousands of people just in New York City, and this is not an exaggeration, in a smaller space of time, trying to go door to door to the same places in the same buildings to get these signatures. But we cannot do this. And I sent a letter to the mayor today with the proposal that I have. I know there's several proposals up there to try to make sure that we can comport with the laws that revolve around primaries, possibly linking the ability to get on the ballot with the small donor amounts already collected from CFB. At first, it may sound problematic, but it's not. You have to get, if you want to get matching funds, and this is the city elections, you have to get 75 people, 75 folks to give you $1, give you $5, whatever it is. Maybe we can use that. The fact is, if you don't have 75 people who have given you at least $1, you probably don't have a viable campaign anyway, or you can double the amount, whatever. There are some good proposals out there. And, you know, right now, not having petitions probably, the petition process probably helps me because my opponents may not even be able to get on, but that's not what counts. What counts is keeping people safe. I'd rather have more people on the ballot and people alive than vice versa. So I'm hoping the mayor will look at the proposal we sent, connected to the limits that CFB already exists, that people are going to be striving for to begin with. He can do that by executive order. We're going to send a similar letter to the governor to use something like that, even for some of the state races for the district leaders and the DA. But this won't show any kind of responsibility. This will show government irresponsibility. And I hope the media really pushes this. It's critically important. People have caught COVID. We're at a moment when the numbers are getting worse and we have a worse strain and we're doing terrible with the vaccines. So government really needs to step in here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, thank you so much for being here and for being our voice and pushing our leaders to take action here. We are very, very grateful to have you as our ally.
Thank you.
I want to just take a moment to acknowledge some of our friends and colleagues who are joining us today and who have signed on in support of this initiative. Central Queens Independent Democrats, Manhattan Young Democrats, legislators from Steuben County, state committee members from upstate and downstate, the Sunrise Movement, NYC, New Reformers, Queens United Independent Progressives, Grand Street Democrats, Chelsea Reform Democratic Club, For Freedoms Democratic Club, and Black Lives Matter Brooklyn. Thank you so much for supporting this critical effort. We are very, very grateful to have you as our allies. With that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, the Honorable Brad Lander, candidate for New York City Comptroller and City Council member for District 39.
Hello, Lauren, and I want to start with a big thank you to Lauren and Erica. Can we hear it to the two of them for organizing all of us? It's not easy to organize candidates across so many multiple races, plenty of whom are running against each other, and of course, many of whom have different views on a lot of other things. But the idea, the clarity, the priority that we must put public health first at this period of time, we all know it, and that's why this is so straightforward, and that's why such an overwhelming number of the candidates who might think differently on other issues all agree 100% on this. You know, like all of you, I've spent the last 10 months doing everything I could to try to make sure we're keeping ourselves, our neighbors, our family members, each other safe. We always say that's our top goal. Of course, it's our top goal. We want to save lives. Everything is second after that. And here's the most obvious way of doing it. You've heard the numbers, but I'll give them to you in my race. I have to get, with under the new numbers in 3 weeks, 2,250 signatures. So that's just as many a day as it would have been before, since it's fewer signatures, but less time. We're going to send out scores of volunteers. We need to get 3 times that to stay on the ballot. That's 6,600 signatures. There's currently 7 candidates in my race. That's 50,000 interactions in the comptroller's race alone. There's 30 candidates in the mayor's race. That's 200,000 interactions, without even talking, as you're going to hear more about, from the 51 council seats where the geographies are even smaller. The odds of overlap are even greater. It's just so straightforward. If we are putting public health first, then in-person petitioning makes no sense. The governor says we're putting public health first. The mayor says we're putting public health first, but this is not doing it. This is very simple. You've heard all the alternatives. There are a number of ways we could do this, but the bottom line is clear. We don't want to run our campaigns putting people's lives at risk, and that's what this policy forces us to do. Let's change it. Thanks to everyone for supporting it. Extra thanks to Erica and Lauren for bringing everybody together to make it clear. It is not too late. This change can be done. It can and must be done now. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Council Member. I think first, I love your background. I look forward to the day we can safely gather together in the park.
Amen. Thank you. That was the idea, was like, we want to be out with lots of people again, but we have to save the lives of ourselves and our neighbors to get there. So,
we can pretend we're out there at our press conference in person together.
Thank you.
Lauren,
Yes.
just a quick note for housekeeping. Instead of just interrupting, we're going to send you a private message saying 1 minute left. It's a bit more professional and less intrusive. So just be mindful to your chat for the 1 minute mark. Thank you.
And that was to the speakers.
Yes.
Okay, great. And so our next speaker, we're joined today and grateful for the support of the Honorable Carlos Menchaca, candidate for New York City Mayor and City Council member for District 38.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carlos Menchaca, and so much has already been said. What I want to do is lend my voice and that of the growing campaign for mayor. What I want to just emphasize here are the incredible energy that's coming in through all our campaigns. People want to engage in this democracy. If we believe in public health can be front and forward, allowing democracy to happen. Let's let democracy happen. Let's change the regulations. There are a lot of great ideas. I'll support the best one, but let's get this done. Thank you, Lauren and Corey, for starting us off with some really beautiful testimony. I'm all in. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Up next, we are joined today by my friend and State Committee colleague, Amelia Descoudin. Amelia is the Democratic District Leader for the 37th AD Part A here in New York and the New York State Committee member for the 37th Assembly District.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me. I feel really, my heart is full that so many people have come together for this. Petitioning is kind of the dirty bottom half of the political process. Everyone has to do it. Nobody, fully enjoys it. It's a chance to talk to voters, but it's a slog. And you don't just have to talk to the number you need. You have to talk to, as much more to get enough so that someone can't kick you off the ballot. And then not each person you're going to talk to is going to want to sign your petition. So the amount of people we're talking about to put people through, the part of the political process that's just logistical, just to get people on the ballot, let alone, win, is unacceptable in this time. I have COVID right now, and I'm privileged to say that I don't have symptoms, but in about a month, I'm expected to not only collect signatures for any candidates that I happen to support. As district leader, I have to coordinate a slate of judicial delegates here in Queens. And that's about 12 people, 16 people running to represent our party in our districts to select judges. This doesn't affect just, like Lauren said, folks running for the big offices. It goes all the way down to these volunteer positions that you're not going to see on your ballot. And that many people times that many signatures is guaranteed to make this a super spreader event. And the solutions that the state legislature has come up with so far are entirely unacceptable. Bringing the number down doesn't remove the fact that we still have to go out and talk to folks. And whether that's going to be volunteers or paid canvassers that campaigns might resort to, it doesn't change the fact that we're all equally capable of spreading COVID. So I'm really calling on our legislature and Governor Cuomo to abolish the process, require folks to perhaps submit a cover sheet, proof that they receive donations from a small number of people. Some states require a fine. If our elected officials had the foresight, they would have implemented an electronic petitioning system like New Jersey has, but unfortunately we don't find ourselves in that position. And if Governor Cuomo doesn't do anything about it, he's going to continue to have blood on his hands for how he's handled this pandemic. It's not just whether or not you're able to take actions that allow you to publish a book 6 months through. It's about whether you're actually having a real impact, stopping the spread, and putting people's lives over people's profit, or the ability of incumbents to more easily retain their seats, or for preferred candidates to get on the ballot while everyone else gets kicked off. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. And we are very grateful for you to be here. We hope that you have a speedy recovery. And, I think you highlighted we might risk losing an amazing leader like Amelia because of this unnecessary bureaucratic process. And that is why we're calling on this today. Thank you, Amelia. Up next, we are joined today by Tiffany Caban, candidate for New York City Council, District 22.
Hey, y'all. Sending lots of healing vibes, Amelia. In the middle of an unprecedented public health crisis, we can't ask our neighbors to risk their health, their safety, and their lives in order to participate in our democracy. We can't tell people to stay at home and social distance and then suddenly disregard these precautions in the middle of winter when the virus is still devastating our communities. Last winter, when the pandemic first struck, the district I'm running to represent in Queens, Rikers Island, Astoria, parts of Jackson Heights, Woodside, and East Elmhurst were some of the hardest hits. And like y'all, I heard the sirens day and night. I saw the refrigerated trucks outside of our hospitals. This pandemic has disproportionately impacted Black and Brown New Yorkers. And right now, Black and Brown folks are dying at disproportionately higher rates, and they're getting vaccinated at disproportionately lower rates. These are the same people that are historically disenfranchised over and over again, and the same voices that must be represented in our democracy if we want a more equitable government. These are the same communities who will be hurt by petitioning. As candidates, we also have a responsibility to our staffers and our volunteers, and we would be putting them at unnecessary risk by asking them to petition in person. We can't just act like this pandemic isn't happening. And we can't allow our people to choose between health and democracy, because who we elect to serve is also a matter of life and death. So let's put New Yorkers first, let's save lives, and let's waive petitioning during the pandemic. Thanks.
Thank you, Tiffany, for being here. We're grateful to have you here. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge a lot of people in the chat are sharing their personal stories about contracting COVID themselves. A lot of people are talking about what positions they're running for. And I just want to say that we empathize with you. We hope that you have recovered and are feeling back to your full health and capacity. And another thing I want to note in the chat, a lot of people are talking about electronic petitioning. Just very quickly, Arizona has done this since 2012. DC and Denver have done this since 2015 and 17. This is not a new concept. So we have the capacity to do these kinds of things. And that's one of the things that if we can't cancel, we would advocate for. But unless we can, we need to cancel petitioning. Up next, I would like to introduce Christopher Durasinmi, who is the candidate for New York City Council in District 37.
Thank you, everybody, for having me today. I echo the sentiments of Tiffany, Amelia, Corey, and everybody to do away with petition requirements for the 2021 elections. As was mentioned before, this pandemic has already amplified issues my community, Brownsville, East New York, Cypress Hills, Bushwick, and many others throughout the city face on a daily basis. With a new, more dangerous strain, coupled with limited vaccinations available for the current strain, it's important to ensure that we take every precaution necessary to minimize exposure and risk to our communities and our most vulnerable. Again, in particular, Black and Brown communities. The bill that recently passed the Senate to reduce the number of signatures and reduce the time is a step, but we must and we can go further to protect the health and safety of not just us, the candidates, and the staff and the volunteers, but most importantly, the constituency we are looking to serve and help as the city begins to recover. As a state, as a city, we need to move forward, not backward, in fighting this pandemic and waive these requirements. It's a common sense issue, which requires a common sense solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and joining us. We appreciate your support. Up next, we are joined by Christina Kramer. Christina is president of Broome County Young Democrats, and she is also the Central Regional Vice President for the New York State Young Democrats. Christina, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lauren. As she described, I represent and work with Young Democrats upstate in Broome County and the Central Region of the New York State Young Democrats. I also work at our local health department. I talk to COVID patients every single day. And my colleagues here today have talked about their experiences living in the epicenter of New York City last year and the very personal concerns that brings to petitioning this year. I have a similar story, but it's slightly different. Current COVID-19 numbers in Broome County are astounding. The number of new cases in January alone is equivalent to our new cases from March to November. This is the worst time for COVID-19 here in Broome County. And as a local committee member, a campaign manager, and a representative of active Young Democrats that go out and gather petition signatures, I can't imagine sending my candidates, volunteers, my friends and family members to gather petitions with this level of risk here in Broome County. I've petitioned in rain, heat, typical upstate snowstorms. I mean, petitioning is an incredible opportunity to talk to Democrats in my neighborhood, to get them involved early in the process. But right now that's irresponsible. Decreasing signature requirements, even upstate where our numbers are much smaller than what you would see in New York City, it's simply not enough when the risk is so high. And it's critical to the safety of our entire state that our New York State leaders cancel ballot petitioning this year. And I thank you all so much for your work on this and inviting me to be involved and support this initiative. And I'll give it back to you, Lauren.
Christina, thank you so much. And What you spoke about resonates with me, and I know a lot of my colleagues who are with us today. I got my start from the Young Democrats. Through there, I got placed on county committee. That was my first experience ever with petitioning. I don't want other young Democrats that were trying to, build our party and build our democracy shouldn't have to risk their health and safety just to be an active member of their community. We have concluded the speaker portion of our event, and I want to thank everybody who took the time to join us. With that, we are going to open it up to the press for a Q&A if there are any questions.
And Lauren, if you could
Yes.
pass that off to Erica.
Sure, and yes, Erica will be running this portion of the event.
Thank you, Lauren. Any press that are in attendance, if you go to the reactions button on the bottom of your Zoom, you'll see it says raise hand. I just did it myself. If you raise your hand, we'll be sure that we can call on you and unmute you to ask your question. Or if you can't find it, you could pop in the chat, say you have a question.
Okay,
Go ahead,
you
Bridget.
see one? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna unmute Bridget, and then if anyone else, if you could just raise your hand so we can get you in queue. One moment, Bridget. Okay, Bridget, I believe you are good to speak.
Hey guys, so I guess, I mean, I asked Erica this directly, but if someone else wants to say it, or so I have a quote about it, like, I think you make a strong point about the public health risk, but did you consider trying to present a unified alternative? I've heard a couple different ideas thrown out, whether it's qualifying for campaign matching funds, which obviously for some of these state positions where people are volunteers, it doesn't really apply. Like, is there an ideal, in addition to, suspending the requirement, is there something that you are hoping the legislature or the governor, does in response to this?
Yeah, Bridget, that's a great question. Thank you. We hope their response is to cancel petitioning. And I think your comment shows why we need that right now. There are multiple proposals out there. Some are going to impact New York City specifically and won't really help places like Broome County, as Christina said. And as you said, Bridget, where there isn't public campaign financing, public matching. And as a result of that, we need to have a larger, robust conversation. But that should have started a year ago. We knew we were going to be in this situation. COVID has been on the rise. We thought that we were flattening the curve. But again, as Christina said, places outside of New York City are seeing their positive cases and deaths skyrocket. So we should have had this conversation a year ago, 6 months ago. Lauren had been reaching out to state party leaders weeks ago to talk about it. And all we got back was, we're on it. If we're not gonna have that public conversation back then the best we can do right now is cancel petitioning. And then moving forward, let's talk about the process. Let's reform it to actually coincide with what we need and what's better for our society. But what's best right now is putting public health first. And that means canceling petitioning, full stop.
Okay, that's fine for me. Just housekeeping wise, can somebody who is an organizer just send out the final list of who's, your press release references 200, but just give us the list of who's involved with this?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be sending a press release quickly after we end this press conference, so you'll get that.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bridget. Okay, anyone else? Questions? If you could just raise your reactionary digital hand. Okay, going once, going twice. Hearing no other nominate. Oh, Kevin, okay. 1 second, unmute. Kevin, what news outlet do you represent?
Yeah, I should have put that in Brooklyn Paper. How's it going?
Okay, give me one second. Boom. And you are good to go, Kevin.
This is also more housekeeping. I joined a bit late and I see this is being recorded. Is this available anywhere to watch back, like on Facebook or something?
Yep, we will upload this and then make sure that we send a link out with the press release that will have quotes from so many of our allies and partners who have signed on, and it'll give you the exact number of people who have signed on to our letter, as well as a link to the letter.
Okay, I guess that's it for that gentleman. Francine, what news outlet do you represent? I sent you the request to unmute. You'd have to look at your screen.
Okay, I have to unmute. I am unmuted.
Oh, you're good to go now. Yeah, what news outlet do you represent?
I represent myself because I'm part of this. I'm on the New York State Democratic Committee, 75th AD. This is my own personal opinion, but I raised something which comes from our Greeks, our ancient Greeks. If any of you have read the play, Lysistrata, anybody? Okay, the women of Lysistrata decide that they're not going to sleep with the men because they want war to stop. And that's the way you're stopping the war. And I bring that idea out. If you can't, if you don't, what happens if we don't petition? Question.
Okay, thank you.
That's, you know, Francine, look, you raise a really good point. I think, you know, we do have, I think, Lauren, you can correct me, about 260, maybe a little more signers of our letter. And that's amazing, right? And some of those signatories are actually local political clubs. So they represent 50, 100 people themselves. But unfortunately, in a state as large as New York, with as many, you know, volunteer positions that are running, it's going to be tough to have a broad petitioning strike, if you will. And I think as a result, we are at the behest of our state legislative and party leaders and Governor Cuomo. And it's not right, it's not fair. It's morally unjust and wrong to put our public health at risk. But at this point, you know, we've gathered here today. There's 102 of you here. I think at one point we had 110, and they're going to hear us. We sent them our letter, and we're going to urge all of you to continue to amplify our joint message. Let's make this trend on Twitter. Everybody loves a good Twitter trend, especially here in New York. And start calling your elected officials. Tell them that the bills that they passed yesterday, that was not enough. It's not enough to say we're going to reduce your exposure and make it just a little bit. Exposure is exposure is exposure. If you are asking us to collect signatures, you are putting our health at risk, and it is not right. I don't care if it's 10 signatures. I don't care if it's 1 signature. We should not be forcing people to have face-to-face interactions and putting our health at risk. We need to cancel petitioning. And so I know that all of you will go back out into the world after this press conference and make sure that people are hearing us and making sure that they're telling their elected officials how they feel.
And Erica, let me just chime in on that. You know, I think it was Brad Lander who said, you know, people keep saying, or state officials keep saying, and city officials, that they care for public safety. They care for public safety. Something that my mother taught me growing up: don't tell me you love me, show me, right? So don't tell me you care. We know you have the legislative authority to do so. And that's why the squeaky wheel gets the oil. We're trying to make as much noise as possible. And we know a little bit something about city and state government. Show us you love us. Pass legislation or an executive order, because time has run out. Back to you, Erica. Any other press? Please raise your hand. Do not try to be slick and not have a press name and try to jump in here. I love you, but no. Okay. No other press going once. And the way you get called on, you raise your digital hand on Zoom. No other press going twice. Check my text message, make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. No press, no other press. This press conference is now concluded. Erica and Lauren, please close us out.
Y'all, thank you so much for joining us, and not just here at our press conference, but to all of you who signed our letter. It really did, as Lauren said, started from a place of personal frustration and anger, and Lauren and I texting back and forth as two friends, and we decided to channel that energy, and you rallied with us in 72 hours, and the signatures keep coming in. And this is what it means to create a movement. This is what it means to make sure our voices are heard. And it's an honor to stand with all of you. We are so grateful. And look, we're not gonna, stay quiet. We're gonna keep fighting, and we hope you're gonna continue to fight with us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. Thank you, everyone. See you on Twitter, Facebook, and almighty emails.
Stay
Bye-bye.
safe. Wear a mask.
Oh God, please wear a mask.
If you haven't signed on and would like to, please reach out to us. Thank you again.